Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Kate Fickas. I'm a USGS Mendenhall postdoctoral fellow, and then I also have a position jointly with UC Santa Barbara's Climate Hazard Center. They gave me the choice of living in the snowy Midwest of the United States or on the beach in Santa Barbara, so I chose Santa Barbara. That's where I'm coming from. Um, I'm here today because I'm the founder and co-director of the Ladies of Landsat, and I'm really excited to talk to you today. It's a little bit different than the other keynotes that you have, but here to talk today about how Ladies of Landsat is opening up diversity, equity, and inclusion, and justice and accessibility in the field of remote sensing Earth observation. So I just wanted to put this slide in. I feel a little bit like an interloper at this conference. I study grasslands and wetlands and lakes and rivers and aquatic ecosystems, basically everything except forests. So I feel a little bit like I'm not in my place here. However, I wanted to show this picture. It's special to me. It's my great-grandfather. He was a lumberjack in the Pacific Northwest. This is probably around 1920 this picture was taken. So I have a history of forest and forestry in my family, and so I just wanted to show that. So like I said, I'm Kate. I grew up academically going to the Landsat science team meetings in the Landsat program. I really love the Landsat satellite. More than one person should probably love a satellite mission in general. I had the amazing opportunity to go to the Landsat 9 launch in September, but really I've been in this field for about 10 years, and it needed something that it didn't have when I initially started out. So I started out in ecology, wildlife biology, and in those fields, I had a lot of people, a lot of women in a community to support me if I ever had imposter syndrome or felt a little bit like a fraud or just needed to open up to somebody. But then I got to my master's and my PhD in remote sensing, and I just didn't have that same community. I started traveling around the world to conferences like these, like ForestSat, and I just really didn't see any women. I kept asking, where are all the women? Out of ForestSat in Chile in 2016, my lab mate, Jody Vogler, was really nervous. She was going to give a talk later that day, and she was having imposter syndrome and feeling like a fraud. And I said, don't worry, Jody, you're a lady of Landsat. And that's the first time that phrase came out of my mouth. And we both felt a sense of empowerment and confidence that we didn't have otherwise just by having that Ladies of Landsat identity. So that's kind of where the phrase was born. I opened up the Ladies of Landsat Twitter account after a night in Sioux Falls, South Dakota at USGS Aeros, where the Landsat science teams are held and where the Landsat program is housed. And I was feeling really down about my PhD, really worried I wasn't going to finish, as many of us, those doubts that many of us go through towards the end of our doctoral programs or graduate programs. And so I opened up this Twitter account in the hopes that we could start to build a community that helped support each other. When I was feeling really down, my PhD, my academic advisor took me aside and he said, look, you are so special. You can do this. I believe in you. And come on, you're a lady of Landsat. And I knew that women across the globe in Earth observation and remote sensing needed a sense of place like that. Things didn't really take off until I met my co-director, Morgan Crowley. We met at a Google Earth Engine User Summit conference in Ireland, and she was the first person I met who wanted to turn Ladies of Landsat into something that was a community and a safe space for women. She wanted to grow this with me in a way that was really special. And so after that, the rest is history. Morgan and I have been co-directors of Ladies of Landsat ever since. It's been about 4 years, and we've put together a really fantastic team. So this was Ladies of Landsat, and ForestSat has a really nice history. I told you that kind of that first phrase of Ladies of Landsat popped out of my mouth in Chile at ForestSat. And then in Maryland, 4 years ago, ForestSat, the conference, held a small event for us at a bar down the street. And that was our first time that we had a gathering, a formal gathering of Ladies of Landsat. And we took a LiDAR scan from a puck LiDAR that we set on the table, and we had all the women stand really still. And we took this point cloud. And then I wanted to contrast that from last night. I'm not sure how well you can see that with the screen resolution. Last night, we also had a fantastic event. The first time we had a corporate sponsor, which is incredibly surreal. Thank you to everyone who joined us. But Ladies of Landsat and ForestSat go back a long ways, and so I'm really grateful to be here. Like I said, Morgan and I by no means do this alone. We have an amazing team of lead organizers along with us and a lot of other folks who help out when they can. Flavia Mendez, Dr. Krista Straub, Dr. Megan Halabisky, all help us. Right now, we're a volunteer organization. We don't get paid to do anything. This is all in our own time. And this has really worked for us because it allows us to kind of pop in and out when we want to. If we can't take on a task or we get a collaboration request, one of us might have the time or capacity and others don't. And we say, don't worry, we have your back. I got you. We'll get this done and we'll make it amazing. So who's a Lady of Landsat? If you want to be a Lady of Landsat, you're in. We are what we call ourselves sensor agnostic. When I started Ladies of Landsat, there weren't a lot of other groups in this space, hardly any. So we wanted to make sure that, yes, we have Landsat in the name. I love the Landsat program, but anyone who's in the space of Earth observation remote sensing can call themselves a Lady of Landsat. And in general, we welcome all backgrounds, gender, sexual orientations, ethnicities, social statuses, geographic locations, and abilities. So again, if you want to be a Lady of Landsat, gender neutral, gender inclusive, you're in. And, we get a lot of requests for collaboration, and right now tokenism, meaning someone wants to just pop us into a diversity panel and call it a day, check a box. So to save ourselves from becoming token women or the token diversity panel, we go by a mission statement that we hold our values to, and that's just to make the field of remote sensing and Earth observation more equitable, inclusive, and accessible for underrepresented scientists, not just women. We do this through two different strategies. The first is a bottom-up amplification and representation of women and underrepresented voices in Earth observation. And then the second one is calling for action and awareness from the top down. And that means asking those who have power and are in power to change the landscape. So I'll go through both of those strategies with you, and you can see kind of how our mission statement comes together. So for the bottom-up amplification and representation of underrepresented voices in Earth observation, we have community building, Manuscript Monday, storytelling, trading cards, safe spaces, and support systems. And I like to show this little graphic because as Earth observation scientists, and many of us who are multispectral remote sensing scientists, if you think about why we want to include diversity and increase equity in remote sensing, it's similar to thinking about it if you were only using one of the bands from your satellite mission. You might be able to see distinct features, you can kind of make out the globe, but once you include all voices, then features become much more clearer, the picture is much richer, and we all benefit from it. So Ladies of Landsat right now is exclusively on Twitter. That's where we house our membership. We're working on a website launch later this fall. But Ladies of Landsat started out with 0 followers in that Sioux Falls, South Dakota Landsat Science Team meeting, and now we're up to, I think, 10.5 thousand followers, thanks to all of you in the community who's really embraced us. And so almost all of our activities are funneled through our community. And then we have these events that we host. That Earth Engine Summit was our first for set, and then during the pandemic, Morgan and the organizing team held geomixers so that women who needed that social outlet or who just wanted to connect with other underrepresented Earth observation scientists, it was a nice, safe space just to chat. Ladies of Landsat, we were able to interview Virginia Norwood, who's the mother of Landsat. She's the one who came up with the multispectral scanner, the original sensor, up on Landsat 1 at the Landsat 9 launch. We had an absolutely amazing Living Planet panel talking about DEIA. And then recently we were at Capitol Hill at the White House presenting our research to some U.S. congressional members, which was really special. That's by no means an exhaustive list of all the events we've done, but I'm so proud of these events. And last night was another one that was really special. So I also, as a person and as the Ladies of Landsat director, hold community over competition, the title of this talk, as one of my top values. So that means that we're working together instead of separately. And for Ladies of Landsat, that means that we've had other groups pop up. So we have Ladies of Landsat. And then in 2020, we had Sisters of SAR. Is anyone here a Sister of SAR? Someone who uses, yeah, okay. And then More recently, out of Living Planet Symposium, we have Women of Waves, women who use active remote sensing. Are there any women of waves? Yeah. And then finally, Dames of Drones. Any underrepresented? Nice. So we have the full spectrum here. We're calling these franchises. I need a better word for that. But what it means is that we're working together instead of separately, and that has been incredibly powerful. We've seen what happens when, especially underrepresented, groups, these more formal membership groups, act as separate entities. It splits up the community. But when you work together, we've had some really amazing experiences. One of the more specific ways that we're approaching our bottom-up amplification and representation is with something called Manuscript Monday, and that's a brainchild of Morgan's. That's where we ask women and other underrepresented scientists to submit their peer-reviewed manuscripts to us, and then we blast it out on Twitter every Monday. And this is because often people will say that they only know research from a handful of women in remote sensing. And what we're trying to do here is reduce that proven citation gap, meaning that men in general have more citations. There tend to be more men as first authors, but really we're trying to get that visibility of underrepresented scientists going so that there's no excuse not to cite women. And towards that point, Morgan also worked to make sure that we had a GitHub repository of all of our Manuscript Monday submissions. I think we're up to, as of this week, 149, almost 150 submissions. So that means there's absolutely no excuse not to cite women in your Earth observation research. And there's no excuse not to invite women on panels or as speakers in your conferences. Another way that we amplify and increase representation in underrepresented scientists in Earth observation is through storytelling. So sharing our stories normalizes taking different paths to where we get today. And that's important because that diversity of stories is what creates a greater sense of community, because we don't all have the same story, but we all have a story. That's why I like to start out this talk talking about how Ladies of Landsat open and honestly started in a bar in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, because I was having a tough time in my PhD. Talking about those experiences makes it so that other women and underrepresented scientists can also talk about those experiences, and no one thinks that it's a straight or linear path to get to success or achievement in this field. And then again, it widens the view, the field of view of what an Earth observation scientist looks like. So we don't all look the same, and representation really, really matters. With my USGS colleagues and social scientists, we've been able to do what we call user case studies through a social science research initiative. That's where we interview women, ask about their stories, women who are in Earth observation, and then animate their stories into a video that can be digested by younger children all the way up to anyone, any age. And we've had really amazing feedback on those because, again, it shows that anybody can be an Earth observation scientist no matter where they start from. So that's on the bottom left-hand side is Nikki Tooley. She's Navajo, Native American, indigenous from the United States. Nikki grew up without running water, and now she's a NASA scientist. Jill Dinah is there on the bottom. Didn't take her first plane ride until her 20s, and she saw the cornfields, and she knew that she wanted to map those from above. Africa Flores grew up next to a lake that was really dirty, and now she uses satellite remote sensing to monitor harmful algal blooms. So it's really this holistic approach to what it means to be an Earth observation scientist. And then recently we've begun doing what we're calling trading cards. That's where we asked women to sign up and put in their research, a little bit about themselves, and then we take these trading cards to the conferences and meetings that we go to and put them around the table. That started at the Landsat 9 launch, and it was so effective that people wanted to take a whole deck of cards just for themselves. So we started printing more and more. And again, you may not always get to meet all the women in remote sensing, and oftentimes they can't travel because of funding issues or family problems, those kinds of things. And this way we can carry women in Earth observation with us and make sure that that representation is included wherever we go. And then lastly, we have a Slack channel on Ladies of Landsat called Vent. And Vent has an implication of complaining, but I promise you it's not complaining. What it means is more the more true sense of the word vent. It's an opening up of our experiences in the community, often negative experiences, so that we can help validate each other and make each other feel safe. We go through a lot, especially Ladies of Landsat, trying to break down barriers, and that requires a community of support behind us. So if you have a lab, or if you're in charge of a group of people that includes women or other minorities and other underrepresented scientists, I really encourage you to create a safe space like this, whether it be online, like through Slack, or it be through, a lunch that occurs every week or every couple of weeks. It's really important for folks who are underrepresented to have that safe space to make sure that they can help validate each other and just open up about their experiences. So that was the bottom up, amplification and underrepresentation. But another really key piece to this is calling for action and awareness from the top down. And that's asking those who are in power and who have power to change the landscape. A really prime example is me standing here today giving this keynote talk and having a plenary panel that includes exclusively women talking about Indigenous and local communities here in a second. That's a huge props to the conference organizers of Forest-Sat. It's also this is the only session occurring, meaning you're all here. It's not diversified across different sessions. It's things like this. They had the power to choose keynote speakers, and they included underrepresented scientists here. And so it's a huge way. It goes a long way towards representation and making us feel included. Another one is a panel, like you'll hear in a second here. We host a lot of these panels. This one was from the National Land Imaging Summit from the U.S. Geological Survey last summer. And when after the panel, we get really fantastic feedback. We have never failed to get the comment that people are really satisfied that these conversations are happening about what it means to be a minority in STEM and Earth observation publicly out in the open, rather than spoken quietly when we go out to the bar or go to lunch or in between conference sessions at coffee breaks. It's that storytelling element. We're opening up what it means so that others can also feel safe opening up about their stories. Another exciting development is that we inherited Seen From Above podcast. And so Ladies of Landsat, in combination with Sisters of SAR, support from Women of Waves, Dames of Drones, are going to host a, we think, monthly podcast interviewing underrepresented scientists, both for their research and for their lived experience as an underrepresented scientist. So look forward to that coming September. And so I get a lot of questions, especially after giving a talk about Ladies of Landsat, from men in particular. They ask, okay, I get it, I'm on board, how can I help? And there's a lot of ways you can help, but there's a couple of big ones that anybody can do. The first is, help change the system. We're working within a system that was initially built against underrepresented scientists and built more towards a more homogenous group of people. So ask who's in the room. Are there women at the table? I mean that both literally and figuratively. Do you see women sitting around the table making decisions, able to promote their leadership? And then create opportunities, just like the conference organizers did here. They created an opportunity for underrepresented scientists, and we ran with it. And then the really tricky one is to recognize your own power and privilege. So I like to say that opportunity is the currency of power and privilege. When you have opportunity, you have privilege and power. So if you have that currency, you have the ability to maybe give away some of the opportunities that come your way. That can go a very long way with people who don't have that privilege, who don't have that power, and who don't have that currency of opportunity. And then the second part of this is that the system was built over hundreds of years in the field of STEM and science, Earth observation, maybe not Earth observation, but science and STEM in general. So things aren't going to change overnight. The second way you can help is by working within the system. That means helping women if they have questions on publishing, questions on applications into academia, job applications, those types of things. So we have this system built. Oftentimes we try to make it so that it's very secretive and exclusive to who understands how to navigate these things. And that doesn't help anyone. Again, we're trying to aim for community over competition. So if you have the knowledge as to how to navigate these systems, please help an underrepresented scientist. So a new part of what I talk about with Ladies of Landsat now is what we call the pipeline. It's a term. It's an academic term in the peer-reviewed literature for women in STEM. They call it the Women in STEM pipeline. That means, how do we get women into the pipeline, into STEM, into academic positions, industry, anything? And what happens is what they call a leaky pipeline. So women get into STEM, but then they drip, drip, drip out. So I'm presenting here a couple of myth busters, a little cheesy, I know, to help you, if you have that power and privilege and opportunity, to potentially keep women in and help plug those leaks. One myth that we hear a lot, and these are phrases that we'll hear as a community, is that there just aren't that many women in remote sensing and Earth observation. First, it may just be that you're not looking in the right place, and that's where Ladies of Landsat is helping. We have Manuscript Monday. But second, we know that there's a power imbalance in Earth observation that makes visibility of women in remote sensing and underrepresented scientists in remote sensing a little tricky. This is a peer-reviewed paper I worked on with Ladies of Landsat and some other fantastic women from Sisters of SAR and other organizations. We looked at editorial boards for remote sensing journals and their demographics. And it didn't come out too well in terms of the ratio of men to women and the ratio of the global north compared to the global south. That means that those who are in power are the represented scientists, and whether it's implicit or explicit bias, it means that they're the ones making decisions about who gets published in general. And so it comes down to a visibility problem. If women aren't able to get into these leadership positions, they may not be able to help other women become more visible in their manuscripts and peer-reviewed literature. Another catch-22 of this phrase is that in order to improve visibility of women in science, you need women in science to make more women in science visible. And if you can't get more women in science to be visible, you can't get more women in science, period. So it's a tricky part where, again, we need the community of represented scientists to help create opportunities for those who might need a leg up. So that busted myth there is that there are women in remote sensing and Earth observation. This is the most women I've ever seen in a FORSAT. This is my 4th FORSAT conference, and that number is increasing. But in general, visibility and opportunity are the critical aspects to representation. The next phrase we hear a lot is that we just need to hire more women. However, we know that once we get women into these positions of STEM, Earth observation, they start to leak out. And that's because of the environment in which they're housed. A couple of panelists you'll hear today work on forest carbon monitoring. In a social science research project, Dr. Krista Straub asked women who are involved in forest carbon monitoring and Earth observation, what are the biggest gender barriers you face? And they face things like accessibility of higher education, conflict, language barriers, not enough mentorship, not enough women in leadership to help them get a leg up. So once you get women into this pipeline of Earth observation and forestry monitoring, you need to make sure that you're addressing issues like this so that they stay. So again, that busted myth is that retention, keeping women in STEM, is actually a harder problem than just hiring more women in general. And right now we're involved in a really cool research project, again, a social science research project, where we're asking questions like, how do women in remote sensing, Ladies of Landsat, Sisters of SAR, Dames of Drones, Women of Waves, how do they help women have an identity and feel safe and included in their community to make sure that that actually helps them stay in remote sensing and in the forestry remote sensing sector in general, so that we retain them and they grow up and they get into leadership roles and help other underrepresented scientists get a leg up as well. The last myth I'm presenting here is that we hear people say still that they're gender blind or color blind and only hire the best candidates. That phrase has been largely put to bed, at least in the United States. We try, that myth has been busted for a while. And that's because saying you're gender blind or colorblind actually negates the experience of women and minorities who are being hired, who know that there is an implicit and explicit bias and that they are treated differently. The second part of that is that we actually want to embrace the differences that different groups bring to different positions. So by negating saying you're gender blind or colorblind, by negating that lived experience, you're actually negating what makes a lot of people very unique. Again, more research that I'm involved in with USGS, Nikki Tooley from NASA and the Navajo Nation. We're looking at seeing how indigenous communities, why is there a gap in remote sensing there? A lot of work has been done, and you'll hear about it a lot more in this panel in a second, to see how we can help indigenous communities internationally. In the United States, we're doing a very bad job. So what we're trying to do with this research project is bring those unique experiences and help emphasize them in Earth observation and remote sensing as opposed to negating them. So that busted myth is that job postings, interviews, screening processes might be implicitly or explicitly biased towards one group, and you have to actually intentionally acknowledge that, and that many communities have a leg up where many don't, and differences should be acknowledged. I've reached the end of kind of the overview of Ladies of Landsat. If you want to help Ladies of Landsat organize events, help us with Manuscript Monday, if you have a manuscript you'd like to submit, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you are a represented scientist, you have a lot of people that look like you in the room, reach out if you want to be an active ally. Please, we're always welcome, we're always open. And like I said in the beginning, everyone is a Lady of Landsat. So that's all I have for you. I'll take a couple questions before the panel if you have any, but otherwise I really appreciate everyone being here and listening in. I know this is a little bit different than forestry remote sensing, what you signed up for, but I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak today. Thanks.